It is go time on another edition of the Eye on Life podcast. I am your host, Brian Boyer, and Ben Darnell, you are a glutton for punishment, coming back for part two, round two, the second period, the second half. What other analogies can we make?
I think you hit them all.
The ninth
Another
inning, I don't
frame,
know.
another hole. I don't know. I'm running through all the sports and the timing of them all, but yeah.
Either way, there are no fans watching, so that's definitely the trend we have going on right now. And Ben Darnell, as we talked about last week, this is part two. We just had so much to talk about. We brought him back again, which I appreciate. And you have a new hat this week. I know it's still on backwards, but I can tell that it is a different hat. Correct?
Well, it's an old police athletic league hat that's kind of been chewed up now. But tomorrow, or actually today, is a big haircut day. So hopefully I'll ditch the hats for a little while until I need another one. But the hair is just, maybe I'll keep it for Halloween. Maybe there's a use for it there.
The hat or the hair?
The hair.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because the longer the hair goes, it gets freaky. Not you, I'm saying just in general.
Oh, mine does.
There's something I don't know. There's something about the extremes of hair freak me out a little bit, because I think baldness is a little, unless if you shave your head, I sort of feel like you look like you're from like the future or something like that, which is a little, it's weird. And then if you have too much hair, right? I feel like that's also a little weird. I don't know. It looks good. Some people look good bald. Some people look good short hair. Some people look with long hair. But I feel like the extremes weird me out a little bit. I don't know why that is, but the Halloween thing.
When it comes to hair and just teaching people communication, this is an uncredible hairstyle. So if you saw me with just this long hair, the longer the hair you have, the least credible you are. And that goes for men and women. I learned this a long time in communications, and you just look at politicians. You don't see many politicians, even females, that have a real long hair. And I don't know what it is, man, but as soon as I get my hair cut, my bosses are going to believe me 10 times more than what they did at the beginning. So
do you think that depends on the industry that you're in? Because like if you're a musician, for example, I think that the long hair is obviously, I feel like I'm going to get into this in a second here, because I want to call out music in a second here. I feel like the longer hair you have as a musician, the more credibility you have. I want long hair on my bands. I'm sorry. Maybe that's a traditional way of thinking. I know it's not as obviously depends on if you're listening to heavy metal or yacht rock or rap. I know it depends on the artist and what kind of hair they might have. But if I'm listening to rock and roll, I want long hair. I'm sorry. That's just how it is for me.
Well, you may have grown up in another time too, because there's just a lot of metal guys now that don't have. I think of Metallica. Remember when they cut their hair?
They did.
It wasn't like a rebrand, but it was a rebrand in a way.
It was a sellout. It was a sellout. Metallica,
it felt that way, yeah.
I mean, and when I was growing up, they actually had hair bands. So they even called out the hair. And I want to get serious for a second, but also have a little fun. I know by the time this show airs, it's the whole Eddie Van Halen thing will have passed a little bit. But speaking of long hair, right? He actually had short hair more recently over the recent years here. But I do want to call out a special, tribute to Eddie Van Halen, who was a rock icon. When you talk about your iconic rock star and who they should be and what they should be, this guy was about as iconic as you can get. Sad news on the passing of Eddie Van Halen, and I love Van Halen. One of the regrets I have is that I actually never saw Van Halen live. I've seen a lot of concerts live in my life, and Van Halen was not one of them. But thoughts on Eddie Van Halen and his passing, and any influence that he might have had on you and the music that you enjoy listening to these days?
Well, I'm not obviously, but I'm more of a Lee Roth and Hagar fan in that whole Van Halen debate. And I was playing Van Halen records last night just because of the passing of Eddie, and looking at the picture, like I noticed the hair, honestly. And I was like, man, did Eddie do this? And I thought did Eddie do this to fit in? Because if you know him and Alex and their history, and a lot of rock stars, they kind of grew up as nerds. And
a lot of these guys did. Yeah.
Like once they get into the lifestyle and stuff, you have to fit in a little bit. And I wonder if Eddie's hair was just like, hey, I'm a rock and roller now, so I got to keep growing it. But I have the albums. I'm big on vinyl, so like I miss holding something and looking and reading about the actual making of the album. And in Diver Down, one of their first ones, they have the inside has pictures of all the bands and stuff. And when you just look at those guys and know their ages, and then think of like that album, the album after, like these are, 20-something-year-old kids that are changing music. Like that's the one thing I always think with Eddie Van Halen, more so than the riffs, as much as the technology that he brought to music that wasn't being done in the early 80s.
Yeah, you're right. And and he's one of those guys, and that's one of those bands too, Van Halen, where it doesn't matter whether you liked them, you didn't like them, they influence music. The music that you listen to, and I say you being everyone on the show that listens, they influence that music. I don't care what it is. And the two things, before we really get started here, but the two things, the coolest thing about me for Eddie Van Halen, aside from the actual talent and the hair, right? And that band had a lot of issues. We know that you see that, there are a lot of issues in that band, but they were unbelievable talents. But think about this, Ben. Think about the name of the band is your last name. I mean, that's cool. I mean, that's amazing. Can you imagine? Hey, I want to see Darnell tonight. I mean, that's badass right there. And then the other thing is, I mean, come on, married to Valerie Bertinelli. Come on, that's rock. That's like rock star. So this guy was about as rock star as you can get.
Yeah.
And rest in peace, obviously, to Eddie Van Halen, and obviously thoughts to his friends and family and everybody out there who was inspired by Van Halen and Eddie as well. So there is that. And I want to get to another thing here, but first I want to just recognize again our show sponsor, Must NY. We talk about this every week. MustNY.com. Get your COVID masks and wear those around. And thank goodness Van Halen never had to wear COVID masks, right? Because that would have diminished whether you love Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth. You want to definitely hear every opportunity to hear those guys as powerfully as possible without masks on. But mustny.com for your mask, Chris and Monica Bossert out in Orchard Park, New York. And before we also get started, a couple of call outs today. We call out our different cities, different towns that are listening to the show. Columbus, Ohio.
All right.
And I'm saying that specifically to you because I know you're a big college sports fan. So hopefully maybe some of those Ohio State Buckeye fans are listening. So I appreciate that. More Oklahoma. We got a little college theme going on today. So more Oklahoma and Augusta, Maine as well. And
right.
I've never, I was just talking to somebody from Maine the other day. I've never actually been to Maine, but I've heard it's like Australia, right? Everybody in Maine is happy. It's supposed to be a great place. So I'll try to make my way up there at some point. But thanks everyone for listening, wherever you are. We appreciate it. And before we get into the off the field sports with Ben Darnell, who's back for a second week of punishment, which appreciate your time. I want to talk about Brian Boyer for a second. And before anybody turns off the station and says, this guy has lost his mind, he's now talking in the third person, which we know a lot of athletes do, right? A lot of athletes do talk in the third person, okay? We're going to talk about Brian Boyer today, but not me. We're going to talk about another Brian Boyer. And when Ben and I met, we met a few years ago out at the Travelers Championship Golf Tournament here in Connecticut, which is a PGA Tour stop, great tour stop, some of the top names in golf. And I remember you told me about Brian Boyer. So I'm not talking in the third person. There's actually somebody else out there. I think it's not like Mike Smith or something like that, but there are other Brian Boyers out there. And you called that out. So what was your experience with Brian Boyer? I know you went to high school or college with a guy. And what was that all about? Because I want to,
well, it's so funny because like when interviews get set up or when you come into the iHeart building, like if you were looking for me, it would send me a text message like Brian Boyer is here to see you. Or I think with the Travelers, Kelly LeClaire, one of our middle people that set it up, was like, hey, Brian Boyer is on his way. Now, Brian Boyer, who I grew up with in high school, he was a couple years older than me and was kind of known as like the mysterious bad boy of the high school who kind of plays by his own rules. Like I used to play basketball over at his house all the time because it was like a hangout spot, but still like the dude was just too badass and too cool for me to hang out with at all times. So like whenever you get around Brian Boyer, it's like, wow, I can't believe, like, guess who I was hanging out with the other night, and tell everybody, wow, you didn't get beat up. So then, like, when you see Brian Boyer on your phone come up, and this is 20 years ago, you know, and I'm like, what the hell does Brian Boyer want? Why is he here? Like, all these thoughts are running through my head. And then when I see your face, it's like a disappointment. I'm like, oh, man, who's this guy?
You're not the first person. You're not the first person to have that reaction when they see my face. I can tell you this, and next in the next episode we're doing a show called High School Reunion, where it's basically I'm bringing three buddies of mine on from high school, and it's
awesome.
completely unscripted, completely off the rails. I can tell you right now that if people are thinking of Brian Boyer from my high school, it's not that same badass intimidation factor. I can assure you that is not what they're saying. Probably not even close. But I always found that amusing, and that there is a Brian Boyer out there that I share the name with, or he's sharing the name with me. That's badass, because I don't think that I've ever been described as such. maybe that one little old lady I pushed over that one time to get tickets to a show, but that was the only time I was maybe considered badass. But we're talking with Ben Darnell, Ion Life Podcast. Must NY is our show sponsor. Like us, share us, follow us, and we didn't cover a lot of things I wanted to cover with you last week. And first off, you know, the media is crazy. It's a crazy business. But I do want to talk to you because it's not an easy business. We know that it's cutthroat. We see shows and hosts and hostesses, right? Constantly changing mediums, right? You know, whether they go from radio to podcast or podcast to TV or whatnot. And you hear about people getting fired all the time. And it's a very competitive business. You're in the business. How did you end up getting involved with sports talk radio? And the thing I do want to mention, because when I started the podcast, right, when I started the Ion Life Podcast, my first thought was it's going to be a sports talk podcast, which I think would have been entertaining. I have enough knowledge of sports. I have a passion for sports. But then I was like, it's kind of like been there, done that. We can certainly cover sports, but I don't want to do all that, because there are a lot of people doing that. And you're doing it. You're doing it professionally. You and Rob Dibble host the Rob Dibble Show here in Hartford, which is a great show. You should definitely listen to it. It's you can listen to it from anywhere in the world. That's the nice thing with technology these days. But how did you get into being a sports talk radio show host? You're great at it. You have great perspectives, but it's not for the faint of heart. So talk a little bit about your background and how you got roped into this field and dealing with Rob Dibble on a daily basis, who's a great guy, but
Well, I think it's with everybody, when you realize where you're at, it may be where you want to be, but you definitely didn't have the path in mind that you took. I think I could speak for almost anyone in that vein. When I literally first started broadcasting sports, and I think of media as a guy on the corner screaming on the corner, is just media as much as someone with their own show on television or even making movies. But when I first started, our little league had a PA announcer set up for like the first time. Like, we just got speakers, just got a microphone. No one really knew how to use it except push the button to talk. And no one really know the PA thing. So I was like 10 or 11, and I jumped right on there and just basically broadcasted little league games of my friends that are playing. I'm also playing little league, so my game would be over, and I'd run and keep book and do the play-by-play, like live, like not on a radio, like over the PA speaker. So that's literally my first taste. And then through high school, I did a bunch of broadcasting I was lucky enough to go to a high school that was just phenomenal with broadcasting equipment and taught more television than anything audio. So that's where I really got my first taste. And believe it or not, Brian, while I was a senior in high school, I worked at a hospital in the morning, and I was on the path to be a young Doogie Howser. And I went when I went to college, I got a football scholarship. But part of my choice was obviously the money that I was going to get, and if they had a pre-med. So I started as pre-med in college, playing football as an 18-year-old kid, just getting to college, living on campus, and that whole culture shock of being 18 years old and on your own. And college chemistry, I do believe, pushed me over the edge of being like, I don't know if I can do this, man. And you're telling me there's another 4 years after this 4 years? I don't know if my parents can afford that. So I think it was my end of my freshman year in college when I was like, what do I really love to do? How can I base my life path around something that I'm never going to think of as a job. Because my grandpa always used to tell me that if you love what you do, it's almost like you're never working. My parents are both blue collar union iron workers, and my mom is a union crane operator. So I've been schooled on jobs leaving America in a way that most people haven't. Grew up in the Midwest. And I also had the thought where I want a job where I cannot be replaced by some kind of robot or computer. And this is the 90s that I'm thinking this. So my college that I went to, I knew of having a really great student radio station. So there was
Where'd you go to school? That's one. I'm sorry, but where'd you go to school?
It's now called Trine University. When I played there, it was Tri-State. It's in the northeast corner of Indiana.
Got it.
And really fortunate to go there because of the broadcasting equipment and everything that they have going on there. So I dove headfirst into that, and being on the football team, it was assumed like, well, you know everything about sports, but really, Brian, I wanted to be a music jock. That's what I wanted. So I kind of got forced into it, and I was like, I've done play-by-play before. I play football, so I can't do that sport. So I'll do all the basketball. And they're like, well, we really want you to do baseball and softball too. And could you do volleyball? And have you ever done golf? And I just said yes to everything. And then when I graduated college, I literally took a leap of faith on a TV job that I didn't know what it was, what it was about, and it was in North Carolina. And I went for it. And that was, I'm 22. That was right after the summer of graduating college. Went down there and started in a television, helping out with high school football and sports on Fridays, and then doing regular production stuff through the week to fill up my hours. I also was in a town that just started an ESPN radio affiliate. This is 2004, 2005. So I was like, I got to put my foot in the door there somehow, some way. And when I got there, I learned that these people know nothing about sports or broadcasting. So as a 24-year-old, I was thrusted into the program director position at an ESPN affiliate in Southern North Carolina. I've been with that affiliation, ESPN, ever since. So I've worked with that company basically for 15 plus years. And from there, when I was down in North Carolina, again, anyone who approached me with anything, I said yes to. I've called so many weird sports. I've been to so many weird venues. I've worked for ESPNU, ACC Network, CAA conference a bunch, individual schools like ECU, UNCW, UNC Asheville, UNC Chapel Hill, and some Coastal Carolina down in South Carolina. And honestly, all that exposure was based on so much. I wanted to gain so much experience, and I didn't care what it was. And also financially, like being young and trying to make it in this business, you do have to take so many different jobs and work your butt off to make it full time. And then I spent about a decade down there hustling, doing so much football and so much baseball, really, and a lot of prep sports and high school sports across the board. Started a bunch of networks just because I knew broadcasting and I knew the direction that sports broadcasting was going with TiVo and the on-demand. Sports can't be on-demand. Like, you can try to tape it and watch it later, but you're going to run into the score somehow, some way, and it's going to ruin it for you. So knowing all of those things, I've always thought that it's a business that won't go away. And looking at what we have been in the pandemic and talking to all my friends about a lot of them losing their jobs in the sports broadcasting industry, but still, as you know, I'm programming Yankees right now. We got baseball across the board. NFL's had COVID positive tests, but they're going to make it happen this weekend somehow, some way. So that machine will always keep going in my eyes. And eventually, I think it was 2015, end of 2015 into 2016, I got a couple of calls from up here in the Northeast as far as moving away, and I didn't really entertain it until the end of that summer when a gentleman by the name of Dave Simmons, I don't know if you remember him, he used to work here at iHeart. He was the one who picked me up from down south and thought I'd be a good fit with Dibble, and then also running a bunch of other radio stations on top of that here. So I've been here since 2017, January 1. and signed up for another few years after this one. So hopefully we get some people in the XL and get some UConn basketball happening and sports started again in Connecticut, where we'll be rocking and rolling like we left off in March of 2020.
So you brought up a lot of good points there, and first off, congratulations on I know that mountain is not easy to climb, and it sounds like you've been climbing it, and I know a lot of people obviously in media, and as to your point, you start off, you work every job, right, that's offered. You live in markets that you may not choose to live in, if you had the choice. Nothing. I'm not saying anything wrong with it, but I know a buddy of mine worked for a year in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I mean, he probably wouldn't have chosen that. But yeah, hey, if there's anybody out there listening to Fort Wayne, love Fort Wayne. Actually, he had fun out there. But
those are my people. Those are my people.
Those are your people. That's what I'm saying, Indiana. And so you've climbed the ladder, and so now so we've all had to pivot in the way we do business, right? Doesn't matter what industry you're in.
Yeah.
So COVID hits now, right? And you and Dibble are you have a certain dynamic, which is why you were brought in, and hopefully it's different than Mike and the Mad Dog, right? That dynamic, although they had success, right? The show out of New York City on WFAN. But when there's no sports, so sports basically shut down. And what do you talk about? Because I always, you listen, and I'm listening to all these sports talk shows, and I feel like they're grasping for things to talk about. So when you're a sports talk radio show host, and there are no sports,
right?
What are you talking about?
Well, the number one lead every day was what is happening now with sports. Like, what are the plans? When are we going to get back? Are there any hard dates? Why or why not? And basically, I remember March and April was very confusing, I think, for a lot of people, not knowing timelines, not knowing exactly what this virus was. And then in May, we started to think about, we've got to figure out ways to do things, sports included. So I think that the first few months was just like, here's an idea. What do you think? And then that basically started almost every show. Then diving into what these student athletes, coaches, and the whole walk of life when it comes to bus drivers and support staff, and to really grasp how many people are involved with a team or putting on a sports game or broadcast. There's so many people that are involved, and to learn their ways of adapting was a good portion of what we were all talking about. And then eventually, so it was kind of that hierarchy where it was like, where are we now? What can we do to get back? Who are the players? Who's been affected? And what are they doing now? And then honestly, Brian, it's almost like we were talking Van Halen and hair bands and who's better, Hagar or Lee Roth. Those kind of debates kind of take over at the end of the show. But that was the hierarchy for a long time. And Rob and I did it. Rob was at his house. I think it was so weird how it happened, because we were at Bellator MMA, and we were getting ready for a fight on Friday. We were there on the way in on Thursday to do our show. We were talking to a lot of MMA people who have been through AIDS, HIV protection, H1N1 protection 2-3 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 6 years ago now. But that was just a different conversation. And then the next Friday we were together. And then after that weekend, I didn't see Rob in physical form until I think July 1st. So, and maybe even a little bit after that, maybe like July 15th, 20th. So the beauty of technology, I don't know if we would able to do this in 1990. I would say no. I would say the shows would, if it was local, it would probably be canceled. But how he was doing it remotely from a computer in his daughter's playroom for 3 months, that was pretty miraculous. And I think a lot of businesses would probably say this too. The things that we have learned that we are capable of doing that we didn't know before this all started are immense. And I'm honestly grateful for that, because I have so many different ways of maneuvering now than I didn't have before. But it is tough, like not seeing someone. Like even this interview would be a lot better if you were sitting in this room or I was in your room. It's a weird dynamic of communication that you have to portray to the audience, and it's difficult, man. And the other thing I don't think people understand with sports and what these guys are going through in bubbles or even putting on a radio show is that we all have lives around us that permeate all of our thoughts, even if we're talking about the Patriots and, some kind of sporting call or sporting event. Like, you still could be lost in what's really going on at home. Even LeBron James, I'm sure last night was totally focused on beating the Miami Heat, but as soon as that game was over, so many things outside the bubble probably creep into his perception. So that was tough as well, knowing just like, if we leave these places, it's chaotic for the outside world. But for right now, we have to focus and portray what other people want more than what we're thinking about.
And I think that's where kind of sports starts to imitate life.
Yeah,
a little bit, and that is an interesting thing, because we talked about this on the last show. If you wear a Tom Brady jersey, do you really feel like you're actually Tom Brady? And that's a little creepy. We talked about that. But sports is a great respite, right? It takes us away from the daily stresses of life. Although if you're a Giants fan like I am, it causes more anxiety, obviously. But the one thing that I want to point out, so the fans, right? And I just want to say, first off, no matter what, no matter how much you love sports and how much sports is life is still more important than sports. We know that. We've seen, there are a lot of instances where you put sports aside for something like COVID or, the death of someone or people. There are things that are bigger than sports. And the fact that these stadiums are now empty, right, or almost empty with maybe limited attendance, it probably, whether you agree or you disagree with it, it probably is the right decision. But I have to say, even on TV, I miss the fans. And I feel like that's weird on TV that I miss the fans. But when I'm watching, the baseball games, right, or the football games, and I'm seeing, cardboard cutouts of people, which I think is a great idea. I love that. I'm not getting the same satisfaction. I like to see the fans. I like to hear the fans. What are your thoughts on no fans in the stadium? How is that kind of changing the game, the dynamic of the game on the field and off the field?
Yeah, I'm with you on everything you said as far as it has to be done. And I've been to several sporting events, especially in our community, where in Connecticut, our numbers have been pretty good over the summer compared to most places. And our governor has allowed 25% capacity for New Britain Bees, which is a minor league baseball team or collegiate league baseball team. They had one of their best years ever, by the way, because they barely draw flies. And this was like the only thing to do.
I went to 5 games. My kids took me to 5 games. Those games are a lot of fun, actually.
A lot of fun. And Hartford Athletic, our soccer team in town, I've been to that 3 times. But I really got the essence of it when I went up to New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago to watch a race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And I was expecting less COVID guidelines than down here, but I was completely wrong. I mean, everyone was masked up, fans included. There's so many places for sanitizer. They're keeping people away from each other. But there were moments there that day that we all collectively had a response to something that happened to what we saw. And that's the best I can break it down. Like the element of having a group of people together, whether it's 100 or 100,000, when they react for something good or bad together, that collection of emotion is what I miss, and I think what sports miss. Obviously, I think it does affect the play, either positively or negatively. I would say that having no fans for golf may have helped a lot of people. And same with like shooting free throws right now may help people, or shooting threes may help people. But not having that emotion, good or bad, I think is what sports is. Sports to me is getting everyone on the same page, watching the same thing and having some kind of reaction to what you see. So when there was like a wreck or something had happened at that race where everyone together had the that little 1 second together of, I think there's about 5,000 people there. It holds 120, so they're all spread out. But still, like, having that collective reaction is what I really miss. And when I got it, it was like, yeah, this is why this is special. I'm not saying it needs to happen again right now or immediately, but sports brings people together. sports in a way where you can say good or bad too, forces people to talk about social issues that are happening around us. Yeah, we want to put blinders on when we go to sports. Obviously, it is a getaway and a release, but it's something that we all do together. That's what I think is really missing here. When it's great to have it on TV, it's great to watch it. It's great to, I'm going to go home tonight and watch baseball all day. There's baseball all day, but it's missing that collection of emotion, of a community, of a culture, of we're all together. We all know what's going on. And we all know that we're here in this weird, special moment of time together. I miss that more than anything, Brian.
I'm 100% with you on that. I have to admit, I didn't think I'd feel as strongly as I do watching it on TV, though. Yeah. Again, I guess when I'm watching TV now that I'm realizing it, I actually do enjoy the fans, not the fake crowd noise, the real crowd noise. I like seeing the fans' reactions. I like hearing the fans' reactions. I love watching the people behind home plate during a baseball game. I mean, you're watching a Dodgers game, you see Larry King there, right, doing their there's always that, the Marlins man doing his thing behind the home plate. That guy irritates me a little bit, but there's something about the fans being there that adds more meaning to it. It's weird to see the Yankees and the Rays playing in San Diego. That's just weird, and it bothers me. It's still the same game. It's baseball, but it doesn't have the same impact. I don't know. I didn't think it would affect me as much on TV, but it does.
I think too, and I always think of human behavior and studies of, if you smile at somebody, they're more likely to smile back at you. And just when you see someone do something, even if you feel it strongly in yourself, you react more strongly because it feels like you have permission to.
Right.
Just imagine being like a fan of the Lakers last night in a crowd full of people, and they win, and you don't stand up, but everyone else around you stands up. It's almost like it's imperative. It's a rule. You have to stand up, and like everyone's showing you what to do. So when you watch it and you see something happen and there's no reaction, and you react, you feel awkward reacting by yourself. And it wouldn't feel so awkward if you had a bunch of people on television that are reacting in the same way. So I think it is a different collection of emotion. If you had a bunch of people watching it with you, it may be different, just because you have that permission to be an idiot and react like a crazy person.
Is it bad that I act like an idiot even by myself?
No, that's a great thing for sports. That's
what my kids around.
Use is, yeah.
I mean, my son still reminds me of my reaction when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, which it still remains to be seen. But that was all over YouTube. All those reactions. We don't tape ours here in our house, but they still remind me of the reaction that I had. I can only imagine. I've had some very very bad moments with the Giants over the years and how I've reacted. So idiocy is definitely an appropriate word. The other. So speaking of idiocy, idiots, right? As sports fans, I think that we can all say, as rational as we've been, or as rational as we are as humans, some of us, that sports does sometimes bring out the best in us, and it does bring out the worst in us. And I know you guys take calls. And there's some wacky ones, which I want to ask you about, some of the wacky ones. But the thing I've always wondered, and as somebody who's in the industry, and we talked about this as a teaser in the last show, you have these talking heads on, these guys who, you may or may not enjoy listening to, but you have the Colin Cowards, or, when Mike and Mike in the Morning was on, and Skip Bayless, and people lose their minds when they say something that somebody doesn't agree with, or something that's outlandish. And I almost feel like the joke's on us, because I feel like these guys are almost saying it just to get that reaction, just to get those extra tweets. But when we talk about these talking heads, these well-known guys that are on radio, Jim Rome, right? Another one. Why do people lose their minds over what these guys are saying? I mean, I understand they have a platform that's widely listened to, widely viewed. So what they say, just like in any other medium, right? Politics or economics, people who have the loudest pulpits, right? They are heard. But Skip Bayless says something. I don't really care. I always laugh at it, but he says something about, Dak Prescott not being a franchise quarterback, and everyone, not even just Cowboys fans, they lose their mind. Why? Why do people care so much what these guys say? Or these women, if for the women, there aren't many women out there doing it, but why do we lose our minds over that?
Well, I think for a lot of people, and to speak on, like you losing your mind over Daniel Jones, it is just one pick. I know it's a quarterback, and it's kind of, but if things go wrong, they can always trade him, and they can.
It's the sixth pick in the draft.
But if it was if Daniel Jones goes to the Jets, who I know you're not a fan of,
right,
you're not going to be so upset. I think that
I'm going to laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
I am.
You're going to be happy about it.
Of course.
But when it's your team, and if someone's saying something bad about your guy, and now, gosh, team loyalty for players doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for fans either, especially with everyone's fantasy football love and who they have in their heart as someone who's made them some money somehow, some way. When someone talks bad about that person, it's almost like talking bad about your family member. It's talking bad about your tribe. It's talking bad about something that, I'm wearing on my body. How dare you speak of such things, even though you may be completely more informed. You may be in that locker room. You may have just talked to the coach, and you're not even telling us that you just talked to the coach, and you're telling us true reality. I can't accept it because that's my team. That's my guy. You're talking bad about my guy and my family. So that's why I think people get such a crazier reaction than most, especially doing radio down in Carolina. I really got this because Duke and North Carolina rivalry is just ridiculous. And the things that they complain about or say, or the little digs, are just so stupid and childish. And it's almost like you're talking to 65-year-old men who are getting bent out of shape about the way a guy shook someone's hand or something. And like, that's when I really got schooled on it. Like, these people, they don't care really about the facts of what happened or the background story or the context of what led up to that or the comment. That's their team. That's the way they want it to be. And if it's any other way, and if you say it's any other way, especially if you're not a fan or you're not a member of my tribe, then I'm going to lose my mind on you.
Yes, I understand that. And actually, I mean, these days when the media go off, when they talk about the Giants, I have to agree with everything they say anyway, because it's usually bashing the Giants, and the Giants deserve to be bashed. What drives me crazy is when, we're in week 11 and the Giants are, 4 and I'll make sure I'm doing my math right, 4-7. And there's an article in one of the New York papers. Here's how the Giants can still make the playoffs. I don't want to hear about how the Giants can make the damn playoffs. I don't care if they're not mathematically eliminated. They're eliminated by the way they play. And so I want to run a couple of pet peeves that I have by you, because as a member of the media, I want to see if I'm overreacting or if this is legitimate.
All right.
So that's one thing. Those fluff stories. I'm not going to call out the reporters. There's a reporter in New York who I've tweeted to many times. He's actually very nice. He's responded to me. I said, I don't want to hear about the Giants' playoff chances when they're 4-7, 4-8. I don't care if the division is the winner of the NFC East wins 7 games. Don't talk about the Giants making the playoffs. They're not making the playoffs. And they never do, right? Every time they have those articles, they never do. So that drives me nuts, those kind of fluff pieces. So press conferences. I feel like half the time that we have these press conferences, the reporters that are asking the questions don't think about the question before they ask it. And they're generic questions that it's like you're a hack for asking it. So the question is, what adjustments did you make in the second half? Why do you think your team's down by 3 touchdowns? And I always love I always love the question, what do you think your team needs to do to win in the second half? Score more points than the other team. That drives. Is it the way that press conferences are set up that these guys are asking these stupid questions? Ask something that, maybe ask something about strategy. Maybe ask something specific about one of the plays. Those questions are fine, but what does your team have to do to win the game, to win the second half? Well, we're down by 7, so we have to score at least 8 and hold them to nothing. I mean, I hate those questions. They drive me nuts.
Well, with the first one with the newspapers, trying to make your team think that they still have a chance, the worst thing you can be is not talked about. That's the worst. Even if you were 0-16 as an NFL team, but you had some kind of storyline where you are just absolutely atrocious and you need to fire that's a better story than I'll forget about this team until next year, because then just not doing anything. These reporters are trying to keep you interested throughout the season to get you to watch and listen. But then the other thing with the press conferences, especially in college sports and really with pros, it's an intimidating thing because you are not an expert at all at what happened in that basketball game at all. You may think you are, but you are not the player and you're not as smart as the coach. You really aren't. And you know that when you go into these press conferences. And it is, the way it is set up is a little intimidating. And a lot of these reporters also have future access in mind. So if I was to be really bad and mean and say things that, you know, not really open-ended questions to let the coach happen, but say what everyone's thinking, like, why are you still playing Daniel Jones to Judge as a coach?
Right.
Judge may never call on me ever again. And that's and that I think is a real problem with our business and sports journalism, is it's really hard to be an objective journalist in this game because of the access that you could lose. But also, I'll never forget one of my first press conferences. I was in Cleveland after an NCAA first or second round game, and Villanova had just lost, and one of their players was a senior. I forget what I even asked Brian. I don't even remember the wording of the question, but it was basically, your season's over, your basketball career's over. Like, you know, what's next for you? And I remember him just breaking down and crying. And like, I painted the realization for him. Like, you're never going to play college basketball again, dude. That's basically what I said, but I didn't say it.
Right.
Jay Wright, legendary coach, puts his arm around the kid while he's crying and looks at me and goes, "You're going to ask him right now? Like, you can't wait for a week. You can't wait for 2 weeks. This guy just had his heart ripped out." Ever since that moment, I have been very choosy on, especially, I hate when people ridicule someone that's either in college, especially high school kids. I hate when old guys try to criticize what a high school kid did in a game or how he acted. He's not even 18. So that's been one of my big pet peeves, but I do feel pressure to not make everyone mad on the dais, even though some of the questions are journalistically the perfect question to ask. I think a lot of people have that in their mind as well, as much as the access thing.
So there's balance, I guess. I understand the access thing, and I wish, you know, teams really should just let people ask the questions, even if they're harsh. I mean, the fans have a right to hear the reality. I can watch a game as a fan and maybe not be an expert on all the X's and O's, but know that the team played like crap and certain players should be called out. So I appreciate some honesty, and I guess maybe that's what editorials are for, and that kind of thing. That's a different kind of writing, but I do get that. I just don't like some of those questions, like, you know, what do you need to do better in the second half? Well, you know, we're down by 3 touchdowns, so we need to score more points. I just don't like those. The other pet peeve that I have, this drives me nuts, is that there are certain players. Actually, I think it's when there's a press conference and a player says something that's not even, they try to crack it. The player cracks a joke. And I put the word joke in quotes, right? Because it's really not that funny. And the media is like, they're kissing his ass. They're laughing like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. They're literally cackling like school children. And it's not that funny. Why do they feel the need to it's almost like an uncomfortable laugh. So LeBron James could sneak, you know, we could breathe a certain way or say, or make some kind of comment, and it's supposed to be lighthearted, and they laugh like they're in the front row of Jerry Seinfeld, you know, stand-up comedy. Why does the media feel the need to cackle when an athlete makes a joke that's not even really that funny?
Well, it goes back to the access thing. I remember a particular press conference not too long ago with Jerry Jones, where one of the traditional Dallas reporters is like, it's a horrible fake laugh. Like, I know you're fake laughing. But again, trying to get on the good side of especially coaches and marquee players for access and for trust. Brian Windhorst has the most trust from LeBron James because he's been covering him since he was in high school.
Right.
If Brian Windhorst was really tough on LeBron James through his years of being 17 through 20 years old, would Brian Windhorst be on ESPN, NBA Countdown to this day? I don't know. And again, like a lot of us are fans. I was a huge Ja Morant fan when he came through Hartford and he was playing against Florida State and they lost to Florida State. And you know, like if the dude said something that's probably not funny to him at all, but just like funny to all of us. I remember him doing something that was just like just goofy. He's a goofy he's 19.
19, right.
So it was just like, you know, laughing at that. And then he looks at us like, you know, you guys are obviously not really my friend. Like it was that moment, you know. But a lot of us are fans. Like if LeBron James says a joke and Brian Boyer says a joke, probably laugh a little bit harder at LeBron's because I'm a bigger fan of LeBron.
It depends on which Brian Boyer. I mean, the badass from Indiana. So badass Brian Boyer from Indiana. You're laughing at him.
I'm laughing.
You're gonna get beaten. You're gonna get beaten. So you mentioned, so, you know, I sort of feel like, yeah, so the media, I do have a tremendous amount of respect actually for the media, but there are certain pet peeves, and I'm a media kind of junkie. I love, you know, I love, you know, studying media and all that. But you know, I look at the media, it's a very challenging job. We know that. And, you know, we're starting to wrap up here a little bit. Ion Life podcast, Ben Darnell, iHeartMedia, the Rob Dibble Show, here in Hartford. And, you know, I look at the media almost sometimes as like the referee or the long snapper. You want to do your job, but you don't want to be the story. You're the one telling the story.
Right.
You don't want to turn into the story, which, you know, does happen sometimes. Notoriety, right? But I guess, you know, you mentioned the thing with Jay Wright and, you know, kind of calling you out in the middle of a press conference. Whether you've been on radio or interviewing someone or – even if it was off the record, what's kind of been your most uncomfortable moment in the field that you have? Because you're dealing with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities. You guys are human, right? You're not robots. You're going to say something that you shouldn't have said. Maybe the FCC has come down on you on something, right, at some point. But what's been the thing that sticks out of you? And I can tell by the look on your face, there's something that you're thinking of, or maybe it's multiple. But what is the most uncomfortable moment you've had? Let's say on air. Where you're like, oh boy, that's bad. I'm gonna need to take a few steps back on this one.
The first thing I think of, I forget this man's name, but we were doing a Hall of Fame something or other for some town in North Carolina, and he was an MC for it, and he was coming down a favor for a friend. He covered the Philadelphia Eagles. He used to be a color analyst for the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, I forget his name. But the man only has his right arm. He didn't have his left arm. This was a time where Terrell Owens had just been brought on to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I pride myself in breaking ice at press conferences and trying to be the guy that has multiple questions ready to go. I'm not afraid to grab a microphone and ask. And so we kind of get through a lot of the Hall of Fame questions that we were going to ask him. And we were just, you know, kind of shooting the breeze and asking him random Eagles and NFL questions. And I started with, you know, again, remember this guy has one arm. I don't know how he ended up losing his arm. Gosh, I wish I would remember this man's name, which makes me even worse of a person. But I said, let me ask you, you have Terrell Owens on your team now. You're really going to have your hands full. And I immediately, like, as soon as I said that to you too, I feel my heart down in my stomach. And like, I knew it was soon, like as full came out of my mouth, I felt like, what do I do? And I didn't correct myself. I just kept the thought in my mind and like tried to act very normal. And then the press conference was over and I ran away.
and what was his reaction? I mean, was he offended? It was clearly not an intentional derogatory thing. It was just a slight misstep. But was he cool about it? Was he like, oh, who is this jerk?
He said, well, since I only have one hand, it's not going to be that big a deal.
Good. Great. That's actually, the response is actually great. That's, oh man.
I was like, yeah.
Anything that's actually, it's not funny, but it is funny. Anything ever with an athlete, anything that you've, you know, because I feel like some of these athletes are, you know, especially right after a game, you know, they can be, and I get it, you know, they've just lost a game. They've had a bad day at the office. You know, they can be very ornery. And, you know, you see some of these colorful personalities that are out there. There are several. I don't know why there's plenty that are big, that are more colorful than this guy, but Baker Mayfield comes to mind, you know, when he's, you know, bashing this guy. That's the worst question I've ever heard. How could you ask that stupid question? Because there's an axe to grind sometimes, right? But have you ever had an interaction with an athlete where there's kind of same reaction, like, oh shoot, I should not have asked that. I want to rewind and try it again.
I've had a lot of. Well, I covered the Carolina Panthers for almost 10 years, so I went to a lot of practices and went to a lot of press conferences there. And Steve Smith was there for the majority of the time I was there. I love that man. And I never asked him a question because honestly, I was too afraid to, because I was young and I didn't want to say anything stupid, because he will look you right in the eye and call you out on how stupid that question was. And I saw it happen to the best. Some of the best writers in Charlotte and some of the best people in ESPN and Fox Sports just get torn down by Steve Smith. So I was always afraid there, but I will give you this one that I was afraid of, and I wish I had it back, which might tie into fandom versus where I'm at. So when I was a kid, I went to a Green Bay Packers practice. And if you know any of the traditions there at Green Bay Packers practice, if you're a kid, you bring your bicycle so they can ride your bike to film while you run alongside with their shoulder pads and helmets. It's a really cool thing to do.
I've seen that before, yeah.
So I'm really a Bears Colts fan, as I told you before, and I'm not really a Packers fan, but I know Brett Favre, I know Sterling Sharp, I know all the big names. Sterling Sharp comes out to all of us kids, and we're all trying to get an autograph. And this one older man comes up and says, Sterling, I came all the way from Florida to get your autograph. And he said, you didn't tell him, kids? You didn't tell him? And we're all like, what is he talking about? He goes, yeah, man, sorry, it's not in my contract to sign autographs. And then walks away from all of us kids. And that always broke my heart. 3 years ago, Jim Calhoun golf tournament here at Avon Country Club in Hartford. Sterling Sharp's one of the guests. Rob Dibble and I are doing our show. Sterling Sharp's going to come on for an interview. Rob knows this story of my childhood and how Sterling Sharp dissed me for an autograph. Again, Terrell Owens again comes into this story. It was when he was not going to go to the Hall of Fame, right? And I asked him what he thought about that, being a receiver and Terrell Owens being one of the better receivers or the best receiver going into the Hall. And he said, you know, Terrell's got to realize that these fans come first, and they're the so I'm looking at Sterling while I'm talking to him. Behind him is Rob, and Rob is looking at me, and he knows what's going on in my mind, and he goes, "Don't do it," and I didn't, and I wanted to. I didn't.
I was hoping you were going to say I called him out on that. All those years later.
So I called my sister, who was there in Green Bay that day, and I said, you're going to be so disappointed.
You might have that chance again at some point. Next time, I want you to take advantage of it. I do want to ask you, and I, at the risk of making the show a little bit longer, I'm going to ask one more question. I might have two. But going back to the whole thing about fans and super fandom, you know, and I remember years ago, I grew up a Giants fan. My dad is a huge Giants fan, and the Giants used to train in Albany they trained in Albany for a while, which is the area where I grew up. And there was I forgot, I don't remember the exact story, but there was some story. Somebody that we knew had gone up to Eli was in a TGI Fridays, and he was with his family. And I think I don't know the exact circumstance, but I don't know if they went up to him while he was at the booth eating or it was after. But they went up to him and asked for an autograph or a picture or something, and he I guess politely declined. And we did a show a few weeks back with Erin Brown, who does red carpet interviews in Hollywood. She was amazing. She's a great guest. And we were talking about some of the obligations, and again, quote obligations. Nobody has to give an autograph. But I guess my question to you, and my dad said it was not an argument with my dad, but he believed that Eli was fine in not giving the autograph. And I said, no way. Eli should have given the autograph, or he was with his family and eating. He should have said, I'm with my family eating right now. Not right now, but if you want to wait outside on my way back to the dorms, I'm happy to take a quick shot with you or whatever. And you know, to your point, I had a story too. I was probably in middle school. I was down in SeaWorld in Florida with my family. You know, I'm an only child. I'm with my parents, and I see Lawrence Taylor. And you know, nobody knew who he was. I believe nobody knew who he was. Nobody was hounding him. He was with his family, and it looked like a bodyguard. And I went up to him and said, hey, LT, can I get a quick picture? And even asked for his autograph. He's like, no. And I remember, no, man, I'm with my family. Now, we know how family-oriented LT is, right, with his sister. But, right, so he said no. And I even said to him, I said, we're big Giants fans. We're up in New York. We're season ticket holders. No, man, I can't do it. I'm with my family. All right, well, clearly, anyway, I'm not even going to go into the whole family thing. But it always rubbed me the wrong way. I had a bad taste in my mouth. Now, whenever I see him, yeah, he's still a legend. I have a poster of him here in my basement here, but it rubs me the wrong way, to your point about the whole Sterling Sharp thing. So my question to you is, are athletes, and again, when I use the word obligated, should athletes, give an autograph, take a quick picture with somebody within reason? Is there a threshold? Is there a point where, again, maybe if they're with their kids, their family, they don't do it? What are your thoughts on athletes, though, taking a few extra minutes to snap those photos or give a quick autograph as a fan?
I think it makes or breaks your career. I really do. I think that same day, Bryce Paulp let me ride. He rode my bike, and I walked his helmet over. Huge Bryce Paulp fan to this day. And that story, is multiplied times 300 million across this country. And I think that, honestly, man, the money that they make these days, it is such a small sliver of something that they can do. Covering Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton, like him or hate him, that guy stays out an hour after practice, not only working out, but making sure every kid. Now, here's another thing about Cam Newton. I've seen him bypass some old guys with footballs because he knows what they're about, but will sign every kid's autograph that asks for it. And I think that is so huge for his popularity in that state with that franchise. I wish it was obligated from the ownership. The one thing that I hate and I wish is illustrated to fans with Major League Baseball in particular, and just Major League Baseball in particular, like they didn't have fans in the stands this year. When they did this again back then in 1994, the players greeted the fans as they came in, thanking them for coming back after the strike. They got to do that again because the money that they're making now is beyond what a normal Joe can pull at their 9 to 5. And the money that the normal Joe has to spend to go see them in person is just astronomical. And I feel like the fans continue to get priced out of sports and continue to be not even a part of a professional athlete's routine. And it will eventually come to a head because we are the people that still do pay their salary. And that's so true.
And you're right. And I want two things I want to say to that. And I agree with you 100%. Bryce Paulp, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned him because I actually interned with the Buffalo Bills when I was in college.
All right.
They trained at Fredonia, which is where I went to school. And he was, and as an intern, he was the nicest guy.
Yeah.
And that was when he was a stud player at that point, when he was with the Bills. And I think he was still a little bit with the Packers. But here's the thing. And we talked about this in that show with Aaron Brown about the paparazzi. And, the paparazzi following around stars, and whether it's athletes or entertainment or whatever, there is, it can be intrusive. And again, I do believe that if a player's having dinner with their significant other, their family, maybe you back off a little bit, don't get in their face. And to your point about Cam Newton passing up those 65-year-old guys that are probably just doing it to sell the memorabilia on eBay. I understand all that. And you can't always tell, but generally, you take the time to sign that kid's autograph. You take the time to take the picture with the fans. You are nothing without the fans. Your salary is not there without the fans. Those fans are paying your salary, a lot of them. And I feel like it's very disrespectful if under the right circumstances, which I know you can't always tell. But again, I have no issue with Eli saying, no, I'm with my family right now. But, if you want to wait outside for an hour, that's your prerogative. I'll give you a quick photo. It doesn't take that long to sign it. You don't have to sit there and have a conversation.
My friend Rob Dibble, who's been out of the game since 1998, he has a stack of Rob Dibble baseball cards and 2 Sharpies in his backpack when kids come up to him. If they don't have their Sharpie, sometimes he has baseballs. And just knowing that he's going to get asked for an autograph for a kid, I have never seen him decline a kid an autograph, ever.
And this is somebody who threw a baseball 100 miles per hour at Tim Tuffle's head. So if you can't – if you're a bad boy and you're signing autographs, everybody can do it.
I mean, the list goes on.
The list goes on. You know, he might not be signing any autographs for Lou Piniella and his family, but I know they made up. Anyway, when Ben Darnell, and I'm talking Ben Darnell needs to be signing autographs. I expect that if there's ever a kid that's asking you for an autograph, you're going to say yes
every time.
And you know who's also signing autographs if they're asked? They better. Brian Boyer. Not this one though. I do not talk in the third person. The badass Brian Boyer from Indiana. I have this, like, you know, it wasn't. I think A Christmas Story was based in Indiana. There's right, and I have like Blue Collar Town. Remember Farkas from that movie. I sort of feel like Brian Boyer's like this, like a nice version of Farkas. You know, badass when he has to be, but also popular.
No, anyway, you got the nail on the head, man. That is Brian Boyer.
that is Brian Boyer. Not to be confused with Brian Hoyer, who struggled a little bit. But anyway, we don't want to digress too much. You've been great. You've been a great guest, and I mentioned to you earlier before we got on the show. And I'd love to have you back on again because there are a lot of trends that we just don't know about right now. Once sports picks up again and we start, actually attending sports again on a larger level, I'd love to have you get your perspective on that. So thanks for taking your time. I know you're busy. mustny.com. Get your masks. Protect yourself. Protect your families. Protect others. Amazing masks that doesn't even feel like you're wearing a mask. Now on the next show, we are going to have high school reunion. And you know what happens when you get together with your buddies from high school. It can and does often go off the rails. There's very little decorum. The bar is set very, very low. You set the bar very high. Other guests have set the bar high. These guys that I have on, they're going to set the bar probably as low as possible. So I'm going to try to at least get close to the bar, as far below it, you know. But it'll be a good time. It's completely unscripted. So I have no control what they say. I have no control what I say. Although I will say ours was pretty unscripted anyway. I still didn't get to everything I wanted to get to, but at least we got your background. We learned about Brian Boyer, and it's all good. Ben Darnell, and again, I want for anybody that's interested in hearing you and Rob Dibble, because you guys really do a fantastic job covering Connecticut and other sports issues even beyond Connecticut. Where can people hear you guys?
The best way, especially if you're in Oklahoma or anywhere around the country, in Maine or otherwise Columbus, Ohio, you can get us 979ESPN.com. There's a quick little listen live tab Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then if you're missing the show, we have podcasts on also some of the best interviews that we have done in the past, 3 years.
And they do a great job, and they sign autographs. So if you ever happen to meet these guys, ask them for an autograph. They will give it to you. It is in your contract. It is in your contract to give autographs, unlike Sterling Sharp.
Well, even if it isn't, we'd still do it. But I can't wait to the day where we do a live show and we actually see some of our crazy listeners again. That would be great.
Congratulations to all that you've done, that you continue to do, and when you're even bigger than you are now, because I know you're working up that ladder. I know. Keep the Eye on Life podcast in mind, and keep an eye on life as well. Ben Darnell, iHeartMedia, Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell. Great perspective, and thank you for being on Eye on Life.